In these meetings at Delegates a few years ago, I'm pleased to see that some colleagues are still in attendance, fighting the good fight, but there's lots of new faces too. You will have all heard about the school funding crisis, won't you? So I know I'm not starting from ground zero here, but I just thought perhaps by way of an initial introduction to the topic, it would be helpful to hit you with some figures, just to give you a real idea of what schools are facing because of this government's continued austerity policies. No matter what they say, no matter what commentators say about austerity's gone, the reality is it's still here and it's hitting our schools. So, since 2015, £2.8 billion has been cut from school budgets nationally. That means an average loss primary schools of £54,000 a year, £205,000 for secondary schools. 18,000 schools nationally have had to deal with a funding cut, and that is ongoing. In Birmingham, it's worse than that. We have nationally a figure of 90% of schools having to manage a cut. In Birmingham, it's 96%, according to our figures. And despite Justine Greening's announcement in September that there would be new money, and I think the figure was £1.3 billion, you may have heard that figure, that isn't new money at all. That has been stolen, borrowed, whatever phrase you want to use, from other budgets, okay? So it isn't new money. It goes no way whatsoever to remedy the school funding crisis, and the reality is, as I understand it, that money hasn't even been provided yet. They're still trying to make these cost savings that they need to make to provide this money. So things are probably worse than they ever were, despite what she has said. We have done, I think, a great deal, certainly as the NUT, now the EU, to campaign against this, and our main focus of late was the general election last summer, and according to our information, the campaign that we've run on the funding cuts question changed the voting intentions of 750,000 people. That is significant. It didn't quite get us where we wanted to be, but it was significant. And people sometimes say to me, what's the point in campaigning? Why are we doing it? Nothing's going to change. We all know, don't we, that the only way to get change is to campaign, is to stand up, is to fight, and to take that collective action, that collective approach that does work. It's a hard road, but that's what we need to do, and we will continue to do that. There's also some really good initiatives around Birmingham, particularly over in Sutton Coldfield, but other places too. And you may be aware that Andrew Mitchell, I do apologise, the Right Honourable Andrew Mitchell, MP for Sutton Coldfield, I must give him his full title to him, mustn't I, has said that he's done a secret deal with the government to enable his schools in Sutton, because of their special needs or special status, special requirements, to avoid the funding crisis. Now, Sutton schools are like schools in any other place in the city. They have no special need or special status. They need money, and he is misrepresenting the truth. He has not done a special deal in any way, shape or form. It was really good that parents group in Sutton Coldfield, Boldmere mums, got together around about the time of the general election and started to campaign hard on this issue, and there was a really good public meeting and a rally. GMB, NAHT, other unions were there as well, and that work's continuing. Just moving away a little bit from schools, because we know the impact of the funding cuts, don't we? It's job losses. And who gets hit first? The support staff. It's not the case that they are there as an added luxury. They do an essential job in supporting our members. Teachers do their job. That's why they're called support staff. For some years now, they've been under serious threat of redundancy, and it's now the case that teachers' positions are also going. We're having a situation where class sizes are increasing. workload for teachers and support staff is already through the roof. There's a recruitment crisis in teaching. You know that there's been below inflation pay rises for teachers for many years, and all of that means that teachers are leaving the profession in their droves. But it all does come back to the funding crisis, doesn't it? Because all of those things are factors in the funding crisis. The fact that curriculum choice is being narrowed, okay? The fact that A-level classes, where there aren't those numbers, they just disappear, they go, okay? What does that say to people about this country, okay? One of the so-called, big leaders of the world, economic powerhouse and all that sort of nonsense, when we're not even able, as a country, to provide a broad and balanced education for our young people. What does it say about the state of this government that they don't care about future generations? I think it says a lot, doesn't it? So we've got 361 schools in Birmingham out of 376 who are going to have a funding cut to deal with. That's the facts. People say our facts are wrong. They've been checked and double checked, and they're based on DFE figures. So please don't believe anything you hear from the Tories that we are over-exaggerating. We're not. That equates in Birmingham to a loss of £293 per pupil in each school. That equates to around about 1,000 teachers' positions. Okay, it is that serious. What's going to happen as a result? Well, I know that some people, Tory people, have no issue with bringing in what we might term cheap labour, okay? Unqualified staff. It's so important that teachers have a qualified teacher in every class for obvious reasons. I'm not even going to label that, Labour that point at all. The Tories have also said that they've got no objection to making profit out of education, okay? And how are they going to do that? Well, you will all be aware that the biggest cost for schools is staff salaries, okay? It's around about 80–85% for most schools. So when we're talking about savings and profits, you can see that T's and C's, terms and conditions, are going to be eroded, pay is going to be eroded. I know of schools and workplaces where they've said to people, we can't give you a pay increment this year. Now these people have worked really hard. And to be told that, not because head teachers or managers want to say that, but because they've been put in a position by the government that they've got no choice. They've got a fixed amount of money and they've got to manage that. So that's how difficult it really is, Chair. In the budget 3 weeks ago, we were hoping that the Chancellor would see the light, do the right thing and provide the money for every school it's so desperately needed. But you know what, friends? He failed the test, didn't he? He failed the test. He's provided 42 million additional money for teacher training. Yeah, we welcome that. He's also put an initiative in place which provides for £600 per A-level pupil that takes maths. You don't need me to tell you that goes no way at all to address the funding crisis and the deficit. Okay, what we have is a real terms funding deficit, funding crisis, despite the government saying that there's a record amount of money going into schools. Well, that may be true, but you've got to factor in all the other things that make it a real terms cut, okay? So, that's where we are. The question you might want me to answer is, what can we do about it, all right? As I said, I think we run a really good campaign in the election, and that work continues. We had a rally in Birmingham in October to make people aware, because still we have parents who perhaps aren't quite aware of what's going on. That was focused around the budget. That's now passed. What do we do next? Well, I'll tell you what we don't do next. We don't pack it in. We continue to fight, because if we don't, who will? And we need to get more and more parents groups involved as well in every school, putting pressure on their MPs, on local councillors, on the Chancellor, on Downing Street, because that's what politicians listen to actually, okay? They know the sort of things I'm going to say, all right? Rent-a-gobs like me, they know what I'm going to say. but they are desperate for the votes of parents around the election time. So we need parent power to make that difference here. And that's what I think everyone in this room can help us achieve. Speak to your neighbours, speak to your friends, speak to your relatives. What's happening at your school? And you know how you can find out? And how they can find out? Go on the School Cuts website, okay? You can go on that and you can home in on the school that's nearest to you, the school that your grandchildren go to, your neighbours' kids go to. It tells you the deficit, it tells you how many teachers are going to go. Start those conversations. What I've started to talk about with people in the union is, what do we do next? The campaign's not got us where we want it to be. Surely we now need to start talking, at the very least, about balloting for strike action and that sort of collective approach that we don't want to take. Of course we don't want to take it, but what choice have we got? Well, we've got a government that doesn't care about teachers, doesn't care about schools, doesn't care about our young people. What choice have we got? So that's where I think we now need to drive this. And we haven't got anything in place at the moment, but let's start having those conversations and let's start supporting our teachers. If they do start talking about the need for strike action, strike ballots, your support will be absolutely crucial. Thank you, Chair.
We'll now take any questions for David? Brother David?
Yes, Seamus was said in this, and we asked which way to go, and the trade union movement says unity is strength. So why the government is picking up each industry in turn? And what's needed is the combined action, not individual action.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
John?
John?
Yes, as you know, we went down to Parliament and to lobby, and what distressed me about that is that a number of us went along to see our MPs. I think people came back, as far as I know, empty-handed, but you know, we had a Labour MP, and 3 people, I think, had contacted that MP who was in Parliament that day. Mine was at a meeting. We've written it before, and I don't know about anyone else, but I still haven't had a response from Khalid Mahmood to say, right, we're with you. And looking at, you know, what's happened in this business, it's not just in education. I mean, I think it's the equivalent of shock and awe. So it's deliberate. It's not something that is absent-minded. It's something which is getting at the people. I mean, you know, people have got their education in place in all the private schools and so on. Their needs are met amongst this group. But there are too many in opposition who are in the same position. We've seen that in the number of people who are sending their kids to private schools and so on. Even some of the most surprising people are doing that. So we're not getting the kind of voice heard in those places, it seems to me. I agree with what you said about and I think it's fantastic the work that's been done with parents. I mean, that really is encouraging. But unless we can get those people who are supposed to be supporting us to join in, I think we need to work on that.
Brother Hatcher?
Yeah. Thanks, Chair. Thanks, David. This is not just about teachers' pay, or even about teachers' jobs. It's also about the quality of education that our children get. And I'm thinking particularly of those children who come from the poorer parts of the city, and we know there's a big inequality gap in the city, and they're the ones who are going to lose out most. Better off parents will be able to pay for things that are cut. Less well off parents won't be able to. Children who are looking to extra support from teaching assistants or specialised teachers. Those are the teachers who are going to be, and teaching assistants are going to be in the front line for losing their jobs. Those children are going to lose that support. So there's a really important equality issue here. I was just looking at the figures, you know, for kids in the city who have reached the required standard in English and maths and reading and writing and maths at the end of primary school. And no surprise, the ones that come top in terms of percentage are in the well-off areas of the city, Sutton Coldfield, 70% or more meeting those standards. If you look at the poorer areas of the city, it's less than half that percentage reach those standards. Those are the kids who need that help. Those are the kids who are going to lose out, particularly from these cuts. And if I can, Chair, I just want to make one other point, which is that Labour published its National Education Service Manifesto a month or so ago. This is an extremely important development because it offers, for the first time for decades, a vision of a completely new education system, as I say, from cradle to grave, all the way from the early years through to adult learning. And one of the things it says, and I'm quoting from it, is we will make sure that schools are properly resourced by reversing the conservative cuts and ensuring that all schools have the resources that they need. That's a really important manifesto promise, and of course we have to make sure that we keep them to it. There are just a couple of worrying things, though, in the National Education Service Manifesto. One of them is there is no commitment to get rid of the 11 plus, to get rid of grammar schools, to create a fully comprehensive system. That should be in there. Secondly, there is no commitment to take away schools from the control of businesses who run them as academy chains with very high salaries for the people in control of those chains, but there's no commitment on that. And finally, there is no commitment to bring all schools back into a local authority system. Not a local authority that controls the schools, but a local authority to which schools are democratically accountable. So we should support the National Education Strategy. It's very good on the question of money, but we also have to fight for some further changes in it to make it a more equal and democratic system. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Brother Duffy?
Yeah, just a few points. I totally agree with speakers at point on who's going to give birth, which is going to be support staff if they have been, and this special arrangement that Mitchell supposedly made for Sutton School through that, because there's been a swathe of TAs being made redundant, and their role in this is being taken up by the middle class parents there, unfortunately. You know, they think they're carrying on service in the school. That's another argument. But there's also other people. There's city servants just announced that are pulling out of caretaking and cleaning. That's another swathe of workers who are relatively well paid for that kind of work, with decent holiday pay and half-decent pension provisions. They'll be put into the private sector, and they're going to be absolutely screwed, basically, to the lowest contractor. So, you know, we can't just, you know, people tend to emphasise teaching, but the whole swathe of staff who are actually suffering right now.
Stuart?
Yeah, I just want to mention the whole question of deterioration of quality of education, but I very much agree with what Pete is saying there. Actually, most of the redundancies that have taken place are not teachers, but classroom assistants. One NUT member reported at an NUT meeting that there are 8 classroom assistants being got rid of in her school, her primary school, which is not particularly large primary school. But it's interesting to look at the government's response. Their response is that we're entering a new technological revolution, you know, artificial intelligence, computers, and so they're financing the training of more computer studies teachers and mathematics teachers. But to give you an example of how feeble it is, if you give £800 for every A-level student who's studying maths, the school might have 30 students. That's £18,000. That's only half a teacher's salary, so it's just a complete drop in the ocean. But One thing that I particularly noticed as being a physics teacher is that the schools in socially deprived areas don't have qualified staff. They don't have, you go to some schools where they have no qualified physics teacher, whereas you go to grammar school and teach, virtually all the people teaching physics are physics teachers, and that's true in mathematics as well. So with the teachers freezing the teachers' pay, lots of qualified graduates leaving the profession, you'll get more and more difficulty with school to actually service certain sectors of the school education, make it more and more unequal. Just last couple of points. Very important point David made about industrial action. You know, in the end, you can have lots of parental protests, and we've had some quite good ones in Birmingham, particularly the demonstration at Sutton Coldwell just before the general election. But unless that's accompanied with some serious national strike action by the teachers' unions and the support staff unions, you can't dramatically put this on the agenda. You know? And that's what we need. 1 day, 2 day national strikes, as well as building a parental movement to actually turn these massive cuts back.
Thank you. And the final comment, Mary.
Mary Pearson, National Union of Teachers, retired after 39 years, 40 days teaching. The last 30 years I worked with children in care. That's how me and Teresa got French. She works on the social side. What I'm really concerned about with regard to education of children in care, they were often at the back end of things, but there were very, very bright children who were encouraged when we had teachers and schools provided within the care service. Now that has been taken away completely, and so we end up, because there's a desperate need for foster carers, there are some foster carers are brilliant, don't get me wrong, but there are people taking on foster caring who shouldn't be, and they're taking on high numbers of children, and they're being denied proper education because it's not being pushed from the foster home, and it really is leading to going to be a generation of kids who are only partially educated, and that is really tragic. And I think what we have to do is to make sure that every child who's in the care system, their education is just as important as having the care, the proper care. They've got to ensure proper care, which is questionable at the moment, but also that they do continue in their education. There's very, very bright children who've fallen between the cracks, who should have gone into higher education, and it's absolutely tragic, and it breaks my heart to see kids who are really bright, that have had little encouragement from home, now not getting it anywhere else, and it's needs looking at.
Okay, thank you. Do you want to answer that?
Yeah, I'm happy to try and respond to those points. Friends, you perhaps think, given the comments that we've made today and heard today, that we were in 1817, not 2017, wouldn't you? It is really worrying to note the situation, not just in schools, but in education generally, social care, all of those public services that are so crucial. We've also got, I found out last week, a funding crisis in special educational needs provision in Birmingham, as if things weren't bad enough. There is no money to provide support for perhaps the most vulnerable of our young people. A colleague earlier made a really good point about working together, combined action, and all of that sort of approach. I absolutely welcome that. You might be surprised to know that the head teacher unions, particularly NAHT, who are most active and effective in primary schools, have been campaigning with us and really effectively on the funding crisis. We need to keep working with those. It is I don't want to be critical of any sister unions, but it is disappointing that all of the teacher unions haven't come on board with the campaign. But there's still hope, and we keep the door open. But certainly we'd welcome at any of our rallies that we do, any of our meetings that we do, friends from Unite and PCS and all the other unions come along, you know, build it, work with us, because it is you know, a harm against one is a harm against all, and I don't know if, you know, if this isn't a harm, I don't know what is a harm. Lobby of Parliament, yeah, jump spot on with that. We went down there, we made the effort to go down there to engage with our elected members, the people who we elect to represent us in Parliament, because we've got to put pressure on them, haven't we? Pressure the politicians. And my MP was too busy to see me, okay? Same for others. It's not good enough, is it? We need to keep writing to them, pressuring them. Why weren't you able to see me? What have you done about it since? Have you raised questions in the House about the funding crisis? Are you challenging the government and the Chancellor? I have to say, you'll be shocked, Chair, but I will say it, Birmingham City Council have been quite good of late on the general issue of the funding crisis. They've started to do something, they've started to engage, they've started to fight back. Not nearly enough, and rather late, I have to say, but Bridget Jones, who's now the new deputy leader, was the cabinet member for education. She's spoken at some of our meetings, some of our rallies, and they are having a go. That's a good thing. We need to, I think, encourage that sort of approach to continue to work together. On the other hand, I have to say, the Birmingham City Council has just cut 16 million from the early years budget. Again, they would argue they've been forced to do that because of government cuts to local authorities, and government expenditure, government funding has been absolutely hammered. That's correct. But what we expect the council to be doing is fighting back, not imposing what the government wants to happen in their own patch. They need to be fighting back for their own people, for the people who elected them. I still wait for that to happen. Yes, we hope there's a Labour government. The union isn't affiliated to any political party. What I probably should say, to be politically correct and all of that, is that we want the government that is going to put education first and properly fund our schools and our education. That may well be the Labour government, who can say, but I think the initiative that Rick alluded to there is a good one, and is a step certainly in the right direction. So I don't know if there's any more questions, Chair, but I welcome the opportunity to work with you all again. Please go back to your branches, go back to your people, tell them what I've said, let's get something going. I think Trades Council should be leading on this sort of thing. We would welcome trade, not criticism, Chair, we would welcome Trades Council's support, because Trades Council's got an important role to play, hasn't it, in not leading the campaigns and discussions and negotiations with employees and that sort of thing, but in galvanising the support structure around those unions that are fighting for public services and other things. So I would absolutely welcome any support in that way, Chair. Yeah, no, I'm happy to take.
Okay, one very quick point, please.
All I'm going to say is this is now sarcastic to the brother who just gave us a speech. You ain't got to go to London, you know, get down the offices on a Saturday morning. That's what you got to do. And hammer it into them, because they'll sit there forever. People say to me, they won't do nothing. My argument is because you won't do nothing. Are you with me? It's there every Saturday morning. I don't know about Birmingham, but certainly in the Midlands, there'll be 3 surgeries in the different part of Walsall. So nobody's got no excuse for not nailing the MPs. Thanks, Jeff.
Okay, thank you. I can't take this opportunity of thanking David for the excellent contribution and speech he made tonight. May I present you with one of our highly collectible badges. We can assure you we'll give our unstinting support to any actions that the MOT will take.
Thank you very much. That's much appreciated. Thank you.